Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of the first season of Revenue Diaries. I'm your host, Kyle Lacey, and I am super pumped to welcome our first guest. He's one of the best marketers on the planet, in my opinion. We talk about everything from the mental and emotional toll of fatherhood, having a newborn. We talked about him as a believer, the false assumptions placed on Christians in the workplace. He was even featured in the Arizona Foothills magazine, which we talk about a little bit. I absolutely love this interview. I absolutely love Anthony. Um, so I hope you enjoy. Today's episode is brought to you by Lessonly, the top training software on the planet, in my opinion. If you are a sales leader, customer service leader, sales enablement, customer service enablement, you need to check out this product. You can check out more at lessonly.com. All right, let's do it. Cheers, everyone. Welcome to the Revenue Diaries. It's a deeply personal interview series where we ask the top revenue leaders in the world 5 questions about their work, fears, family, challenges, life, everything. There's just one catch. We do not share questions with our interviewees in advance. And that's the only catch. So, all right, let's get to it. I'm pleased to welcome our first guest and the originator of the name Revenue Diaries. Thank you, Anthony, for that. Thanks for being my first. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Happy to do it. So my name is Anthony Kennada. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer for a company called Front. And at Front, we're just trying to really reimagine the way that companies and customers communicate. And so I've been there for only about 7 months, so still pretty new. Really cut my teeth in marketing at a company called Gainsight that we grew from honestly about 0 to nearly 100 million of ARR. Before I left, really focused on building the customer success category, and spent some time at Box and a company called Live Office and Symantec before that. So that's the professional stuff, but I'm intimidated as the first guest with some of the questions to come on the personal side. So looking forward to it.
Well, again, you did not receive the questions ahead of time, so
Not
I'm gonna start with a softball. All right.
okay.
You're about to welcome your second child in the world.
I am.
Congrats.
Thank you.
What's the most challenging part of fatherhood for you?
Man, um, I think there's like 2 parts of it that are really there's one that's sort of the physical toll, and then one maybe that's the mental emotional toll. The physical toll for me personally is like I used to love my sleep, and I've got a 2-year-old daughter now, and we're about to get back into the season of having a newborn, and so I don't know like how I'm going to survive from that perspective. So sleep's used to be a big deal for me, and I'm learning how to adapt. So I think that's been the hardest part physically. But in general, I mean, I think I personally value trying to create a family, trying to create a family experience where we can all live out to our fullest potential, whatever that is. That could mean, academically, it could mean physically, spiritually, whatever the case is. And it's important to me that as a father, I can put my kids in a position for them to live out their potential. And that's intimidating, and it's hard and scary. And there's a lot of kind of pressure that comes with that. And so I think, that's something that I live with on a day-to-day basis. And now multiplying that by 2 kids, I think is just going to be a bit more stress, a bit more stuff to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned spirituality. You're pretty vocal. I mean, from what I can tell about your faith, you call out Romans 12:2 on your Twitter bio. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Um, I don't come across it very often. So why do you call out the fact that you are a believer? And why is Romans 12:2 your favorite verse?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. I think just as I grew up, as a Christian and just as a believer in a Christian home, and this has just been a big part of my life forever, really, and especially as I've gotten older and tried to mature a little bit, shed the ways of my youth, as they say, back in college and everything, and
Yeah.
try to be a bit more intentional. And this was something that was such a big part of my life. And then, when I got to work, like, this was something that no one talked about. It was, when I sort of was coming up in Silicon Valley right after college, this was 2009 on, I felt like there was almost this, like, you couldn't even say you were a believer or a Christian or whatever. Like, it was almost this, like, oh, you must be judgmental. You must, not believe in science. You must, not be intellectual, like all of these kind of false assumptions on Christians. And so early on in my career, I didn't say anything, and I kind of kept it to myself. And then right when I joined Gainsight, I put it on my management bio that, like, the most important things to me are my faith, my family, my friends, or something like that. And then I put it on Twitter, I wrote with the word believer or something, and I didn't think much of it, but it really sparked a lot of conversations and a lot of discussions like this one, right? Just by kind of throwing a very small seed out there. And I've met, honestly, some amazing, people of faith in the technology industry. I've built great relationships. And to me personally, from how I see the world, seeing God kind of work through a very small seed. So I think that the reason that verse in Romans sticks out to me is, it's almost like it's hard. Faith is this sort of like thing that, I think we're challenged, as personally, again, speaking as a Christian, to, like, living in this world, to try to both figure out how to build a career, how to do a lot of the things that are a big part of our life, but then also keep our eyes focused on, the kingdom to come, like a life that's so much bigger than what we see today. And so that comes with this, like, literally transforming how we think and transforming our day to day. And that's something that I think that verse speaks to me. And it's a reminder that, that the things that we do at work are critically important to drive shareholder value and all these sorts of things, but we're also building relationships. We're also influencing people. And all of these things, I think, have eternal kind of perspective.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I appreciate the fact that all the your research I did in terms of just your interviews, you're regularly talking about it. And, no matter if I share that belief or not, I do respect the fact that you talk about it. And so when you said, I'm going to get to the Arizona Foothills magazine interview, which we're going to talk about. But first, I read your article about the 5 things you learned while bidding Gainsight, and I couldn't help but notice the recurring theme of taking risks and just betting huge, right? You produced your own customer success song, which I think all of us have seen and sang. You launched Pulse, it was the Gainsight user conference in Europe, at what I feel like was a 10-second conversation with Nick in a hallway. Nick, your then boss, CEO of Gainsight, right? And by the way, you only have, I think, 4 customers in EMEA to support it, and you blew it out of the water. And then you asked to move to Phoenix after 6 months on the job at Gainsight. So my question is, do you bet big and take the same risks in your personal life as you do your professional?
Wow. I kind of don't, honestly. I feel like I am very, I'm much more, like, risk averse, I guess, in my personal life than I am at work. And I don't know what that means. I guess I've never really inspected that. Professionally, I think that, just especially being in as marketers, revenue, folks in general, I feel like there's just so much noise out there that we have to, like, swing for the fences. We have to bet big. otherwise like, passing, delivering a project that is, mediocre or like good enough just to like get the job done, you just won't stand out and you won't create like lasting value. So I find that I'm actually like I'm willing to take big risks at work, but at home, I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of boring. Like I need some hobbies. I need something, because I'm just kind of, I like hanging out with my family. We like to do, go to restaurants and spend time together. And I used to play basketball a lot competitively. I've got to get back into it, but there isn't a lot of like room for risk taking that I can imagine, perhaps outside of, what you mentioned, moving, like a lifelong California kid moving to the desert.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably the biggest risk that I took in my personal life ever, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Well, I think it's a good balance then, right? It's if we are tasked as marketers, as revenue leaders, as you said, to take big risks. And
Yeah.
I feel like it drives a lot of us. That's why we love the job, right?
Yeah.
And so when you take risks all day long and you go home, it's like, nah, I'm good with, and the risk versus reward, right? Like it's less, I mean, it's your career you're talking about, but it's less risky than taking like massive changes in your personal life. So
Totally.
speaking of the personal life, you were recently featured in the Arizona Foothills magazine. I did like the family picture in front of the Eiffel Tower.
Thank you.
Right. You mentioned your biggest dream. So aside from like the learning of the romance languages, which I think is an entirely different podcast, which I'd love to talk about at some point. You say very eloquently, by the way, after working a career of engineering the future, I love the opportunity to revere the past.
Yeah.
I'm a huge history buff for the same reason. What draws you towards the past, and why revere it?
Yeah. It's a good build from the last question. I think there's so much of our day is spent, sure, creating risk, but also taking chances and dreaming big. But the medium by which we do it, especially now in a COVID world, it's all digital, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about Pulse and some of these other things we've done in person. I know you guys have a great conference as well. But in general, a lot of what we're doing is future oriented. It's digital from a medium perspective. And we do this, the majority of our days, right? We're spent in this medium. And I found that I really get a lot of energy from just the polar opposite from just finding things that are either here and now. So, I actually, unfortunately, don't drink anymore, but I used to really enjoy wine. And, the thought was like, man, I'd love to just like learn how to make wine, something that's from the ground and that weather kind of impacts, things that are just so, you can touch it and feel it and it's real. In some way, I like, actually, this is weird, doing the dishes at night because I feel like I can get a project done that I like put my hands on, right? And so the past is similar in that perhaps it's in the present, but it's sort of, it's telling the story of how we got to where we are. And I think there's clues in the past that we can learn and adapt from that can help inform who we are today and where we're headed. And it's felt like ever since I started my career, I just like slammed that book shut and moved on and start looking towards the future. Mm-hmm. And my career has been like I think a lot of ours, like the years go by, I don't know, the days are long, the years are short in a way. And so I just look back and I'm like, man, I haven't picked up, a book, a history book, I haven't like explored my culture, where my family comes from, like I used to. It used to be such a big part of my life. These are things that now, as I'm trying to be more intentional, are good reminders for me to kind of pick back up again.
So if you could go back in time,
mm-hmm.
to any time, what time frame would you pick?
Mm-hmm. I'll give you three.
Right.
I don't know how to pick between them.
You can do three.
Okay, good. Certainly, we talked about faith earlier, right? Like the biblical days, and I think kind of seeing, that story come to life, I think would be pretty incredible. Second one I'd give you is I studied abroad in Florence, Italy. Nice. And so the idea of the Renaissance era in Florence, purely as a marketer, I think there's something to that about that I would have loved to just, absorb kind of what was happening culturally and, you know, uh, from every vector. And the last one I would say is mid to late 90s, man. I think like
Oh yeah, you guys did that Pulse that was 90s theme, right?
yeah, we did a 90s theme conference actually. I don't know if there's video, but man, I don't know if I'm like just getting older and now it's like, oh, back in my day things were better. But 90s music, like I was watching The Last Dance, like Chicago Bulls basketball. Man, the 90s just were awesome. And as I'm sitting socially quarantined and isolated with my family here and like 2020 sucks, I'm like, yeah, but those 90s, those were great.
Oh man, yours is your time frames are so amazing because mine's like, oh, World War II, Civil War, like death and destruction. And I might
I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
Military history is more my thing. Okay, so changing gears just a little bit. You're currently at Front. Incredible company, incredible opportunity, but so is Gainsight, right?
Yeah.
They both have incredible leaders, incredible products. When did you know it was time to leave Gainsight and look for your next opportunity?
Yeah, great question. It wasn't this sort of like I think every time, like in tech at least, or in startups, we compensate our employees in 4-year tours of duty, right? Mm-hmm. And so after 4 years, you're fully vested, and you're likely to get a refresh grant, which will probably keep you around for a little bit. But that refresh grant is never going to be a 2x on your first package. So every year that you're there after your 4 years, you're there for a different reason. Sure. And so I stayed there for 6.5 years. And throughout that entire journey, I loved what we were doing. I love what we were building. I still do today. Nick is still a close friend. We talk almost as much, if not more now than we were talking even when we worked together. I think what happened to me, there were a few signals that it might be the right time to look for something new. The first was that the team I had built was operating so well that I actually, when I went on paternity leave for the first time, was like, oh my God, they don't even need me. Like they're
actually performing better with me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a net negative basically on the company. But no, I mean, we planned this conference in Australia. None of us had been to Australia. And we just knew that there was this customer success kind of community forming there. And they pulled it off. And, it was at the end of my paternity, I got a chance to go. And I was like, how did you guys do this? Like, this is incredible. So that was the first part. The second part was I felt like we were at a place where the brand was built. The community was, off and running. Customer success wasn't this like small thing anymore. Now is well known and emerging as one of the fastest growing professions in the world. So it felt like for the next chapter, the company would need less like brand building, community building, less rap songs, you mentioned earlier, and a little bit more of like managing the spreadsheet and driving the business forward. So that was a signal as a shareholder that, gosh, we should find someone that loves that's like really, really good at that part of it, because they're going to be able to innovate and push my, what I had built, and help take us to that next big milestone. And the last thing was more maybe selfish. I was just tired. 6.5 years, doing the same thing. I was like,
you did a lot, man. You did a lot.
Yeah, thanks, man.
You packed 12 years into that 6.
Packed 12 years, 6.5. I mean, honestly, and it was like the joy of my career, right? It didn't feel like, it never felt like work, because it felt like, we were all just so focused on building this thing. Like many of, like you probably feel, like folks listening probably feel, with their companies. So that's why I left. It was a great conversation with Nick, an open one, and he helped facilitate the transition and make it like super smooth for me. So I have so much great gratitude for how he helped me, obviously over the years, but even on the way out, to really have a smooth landing.
That's awesome. All right, bonus question.
Correct.
we have a lot of practitioners listening and
Yeah.
watching. Like what's one piece of advice for all of us in this crazy world of like scaling SaaS companies?
Yeah. Um, the one that comes to mind just on the fly is just how important your network is as a practitioner. You meet people in your career, whether it's a boss that you have or a partner that you worked closely with that are just perhaps at the time, you've built good rapport and they trust you and believe in you and they're sort of, trying to help you kind of move forward in your career. But over the long arc of time, these are people that can quite literally make your career happen. I'll go back to Nick as an example. I met him. I worked for someone who worked for someone who worked for someone who worked for Nick at Live Office, right? I was like 4 degrees separated, 22 years old. And I had the opportunity to present to a meeting that Nick was going to be in. And I put the deck together, built it, told the story, super nervous, of course. 3 years later, fast forward, after that company was acquired, we spent time at Symantec. He was looking for a marketer and he could have called anyone and he called me to take a chance on me to help build a company that become Gainsight. I was in product at the time. I didn't even know anything about marketing. And he looks back at that presentation and that deck that I had built as like, gosh, that kid might be a good marketer someday. So I think like, for anyone listening, like the relationships that you're making now are so important. They'll be with you for the rest of your career. Nick was at my wedding, obviously helped facilitate Gainsight. And I can name several other people that I have similar stories with. So build those relationships, maintain them, treat them like the gold that they are. And I think it'll serve you well.
Yeah, cultivate those leaders like Nick who will invest in you, and you can see that just with his social presence as well that he does that. So, all right, this is an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for being the first guest on Revenue Diaries, and we will chat soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.